That's a mighty nice way to start this transcribed party, friends. We hope you're out there listening, and now we want to tell you something that has been proved as a fact.
There are some words that I will always think of as college words. Usually that's because I heard the word for the first time while I was in college, but sometimes that's just when I actually finally understood its meaning, after having heard it for a while. I'm a very contextual person, and most of the time, I will not stop to learn what a new word means when I encounter it. I'll just blow past it and hope that I retroactively understand it at some point later. I tend to accumulate understanding over long periods of time, muddling my way through until the aha moment, which is usually more like a, oh shit moment.
You know, from every direction, men and women have labored over vast deserts, forded treacherous streams, spent huge sums and traveling to the great natural mineral water resorts.
But anyway, college words. The words that I learned in an academic context, I always feel a little funny using them. I don't think of myself as a big vocab guy, you know? It's such a nerdy flex, and it's generally so indicative of a certain subset of guys my age. You know, bullied beta males who learned to build an intellectual shield and then, you know, kept building it, adding on layers long after they needed it, and now it's this big fucking thing they carry around all the time.
These snowy white crystals are packaged.
I don't want to be that. But I've been thinking a lot about the concept of efficacy, which is a big-time college word. Efficacy means the ability to produce an intended or desired result.
Crazy.
I learned it from being a poli-sci major. You know, you talk about people's sense of efficacy when they cast a vote or do some other thing. Why vote if it feels like you won't accomplish anything? It's a real problem. And the word came back to me during the last episode when I was thinking about Peter Francis, hard at work on a documentary that he thinks isn't going to help anything.
Of the so-called...
My own personal sense of efficacy is in flux. I mean, as established at great length at the start of this season, I'm no longer sure about my place in the internet media community, whether or not I have one, and if I do, where it is.
Start giving your family the benefit found in this fine mineral water.
But if my sense of purpose is scattered there, it's pretty focused at home. Arlo is learning very fast and seeing the direct effect that you can have on another human being boost your sense of efficacy into the fucking stratosphere. Sorry, the freaking stratosphere. I gotta stop swearing or he's gonna start. Which, I mean, I'm not gonna be the kind of parent who gets mad when my kid swears. I'm gonna be cool. But I just want him to know 50 or 60 other words first, so he has a proper sense of when to use a swear. Anyway, on the show we've been talking a lot lately about political art, by which I mean very broadly any piece of work that is intended to accomplish something, affect a change, you know, not just make money or garner recognition. Or, you know, in the case of the Chef's Table, a piece of work that would like to appear as though it is trying to accomplish something. Speaking of that, and speaking of Peter Francis, in terms of efficacy, so far, this season, we're not doing very well. And I was thinking about how I might try to push back on that a little, and I thought of my friends down at the Global Aquaculture Alliance, Steve Hedlund and Becky Holt.
It sounds like a centipede with the St. Vitus dance, and our Sammy plays Cripple Creek.
Go ahead, Becky. What do you have to say?
You can say your name and title and stuff again. You know, I never use that, but I always feel like I'm gonna. You know, it's so public radio.
Yeah.
Steve Hedlund, Communications Manager, Global Aquaculture Alliance.
And Becky Holt, Membership Manager, Film Producer, Global Aquaculture Alliance.
Okay, so to recap a couple of terms if you missed their last appearance. Aquaculture is fish farming, as opposed to catching seafood in the wild. And the mission of the Global Aquaculture Alliance is basically to improve the industry's reputation both from within and without. GAA Films, which is one of the initiatives that Becky heads up, produces documentary shorts about fish farmers. They're really pretty and often appealingly non-commercial. If you Google GAA Films, you can watch them. Where There Is Trout made me want to be a trout farmer, and I don't even like trout. How are you feeling about like the GAA Films project and other stuff that you're working on right now? Do you feel like it's working?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to GA Films if you want to jump in with the other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But the films, I feel like the more content that we create that is relatable, beautiful, accessible, and just easy to understand, I think that message is really getting across. I it's always been hard for me to define who the GAA Films audience is, because we make it for industry in a sense, because they're going to immediately know what aquaculture is, and they're going to enjoy that sort of better picture of it. But it's also for the consumer to, I say consumer, I hate the word consumer, but it's for the general public to hand off to your grandmother to understand what fish farming might be. That the fact that it really is just farming, it's agriculture. Mm-hmm. It's raising protein, healthy protein. So I do feel like it's getting across. And I think that the more we develop these, like for instance, our next film will actually have a more of a controversial tone. So we'll be focusing on an issue between aquaculture and wild fisheries, and how those two fields kind of coexist in one community. So that's a sort of, we want to tackle the idea or the misconception that there is an ongoing battle between aquaculture and wild fisheries. Like, it's not one is bad, one is good, or one versus the other. It's that both offer solutions to the world hunger problem. I do feel like they're working.
Yeah. Well, we're always chipping away at it, right? I mean, there's never a silver bullet. So what I've found in the past 3 years or so with new types of content is that people who weren't coming to us are coming to us now. And because we're much more relatable, and we're much better at telling the story of aquaculture than we've ever been. So just over time, we've been able to just expand our world beyond what we had already been doing.
Since I'm not a fish farmer, it hadn't really occurred to me that fish farmers would be the audience for the GAA's content and not just the subject. I just assumed all their work was for me. Listen, I'm not totally off base for feeling that way. I'm recording this on a weekend where a 3-hour Avengers movie and a 90-minute Game of Thrones episode came out. Everything truly is for me right now. I'm at the height of my demographic supremacy, and I'm getting everything I ever wanted. But anyway, yeah, of course, fish farmers would enjoy seeing these films the same way chefs probably like watching Chef's Table, and podcasters like listening to podcasts. And by that I mean they do it to steal ideas. And I watch the GAA films because I like to think about the effectiveness of political art, and maybe you'll watch for a third reason. This gets at a larger point about efficacy, which is that Steve and Becky, they're trying to create and maintain a positive public perception about aquaculture, which is a very large mission, and it's one where you can measure success in a lot of different ways.
I know the measurement piece is always tricky, especially like you say with a big target, because I do feel like even just changing one mind about it is positive. And that's a hard thing to sometimes read, that you kind of have to get those face to face to really understand them.
Right. How often do you get an opportunity to do that?
Pretty often. Yeah, when we show these films, we've been to a couple universities now. We've been up to the Gulf of Maine Research Institute and did a big release there of all of our films, and got to speak with some local Portland folks about the films at our conferences that we go to, at our own conference that we host. And yeah.
Peter Francis's goals are maybe a little bit more specific, which is probably part of the problem. It's hard to predict in what sort of way a documentary would impact people, so it's helpful if you can count a lot of different reactions as helpful. You know what I mean? Like, a documentary is a hammer, so make sure that your job doesn't call for a screwdriver instead. Okay, so that sound effect means that it's time for a systemic understanding lightning round. The next conference that the GAA is hosting is this fall in India.
And this year it's in India.
Turns out they do a lot of shrimp farming in India.
Predominantly shrimp farming and processing.
Learn something every day, right? Also, China is becoming a bigger and bigger market force.
Like, I feel like China is driving a lot of industry talk right now.
They used to be net exporters of seafood, and now, as they grow and grow, they've become net importers.
They're net importers now. They were net exporters until about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I asked if that was a good or a bad thing. I guess I was thinking that as demand increases, it was more likely the industry would cut corners, trying to increase supply as quickly as possible. Steve said that was unlikely due to risk management and brand reputation. I can see that, yet I also thought about how people still eat at Chipotle and shop at Trader Joe's even though they poison people like once a month. So, let's unpack that. Okay, for one thing, aquaculture providers are more fragmented, more mom and pop than, say, romaine lettuce suppliers, so a contamination outbreak might do more damage to them than it would a big corporation. You can see in general how keeping companies small and breaking up monopolies makes the world safer for most people. But see, these fish farmers are so small, they might in fact be too small. They can fly under the food regulatory radar, and while maybe they are incentivized to keep their food safe, they're not necessarily incentivized to do that in a sustainable and otherwise safe way. Like, you can make food safe to eat while doing a lot of damage to the rest of the ecosystem, you know? This precise and weird little predicament is exactly what gives rise to groups like the GAA. They fall into the cracks and the shadows of the existing system, and they fill in the holes. They incentivize farmers to do better than the market alone would. And they do that in a lot of ways. They don't just make films, but hey, if you're a fish farmer, you keep a clean house, they might just come make one about you. I mean, Steve and Becky are pretty busy, but you never know.
So I think that as long as the consumer is asking for it, at the end of the day, it comes down to what people are interested in. If nobody cared about sustainability, we wouldn't be talking. We wouldn't be doing this. And I think that we just need to keep talking about solutions for seafood instead of all of the problems and try to paint it in a better light.
See, that's the kind of positivity I was looking for. So, okay, I was feeling a little bit better about the efficacy of political documentary making, and so with that part settled, I sat down with my friend Sarah Wrightsman, who is, well, okay, she's a lot of things. I'll let her tell you.
So I'm Sarah Wrightsman. I am the Executive Director of the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast, though I actually wear a lot of hats. So I'm the Executive Director of the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast and the housing planner for the Regional Economic Development Center, and I sit on my town's planning board, that'd be the town of Durham, and I am a blogger for Stay Work Play, and I write their housing and politics column.
Okay, so this is, yeah.
So that was a lot.
Yeah. Sarah is working at fixing some of the exact same problems that Peter Francis was talking about last time, so I knew I wanted to get her perspective on those issues, and also just get a sense of what a career in that space would be like. So we met at Cracked Skulls Coffee in Newmarket, New Hampshire. Shout out to them for not complaining about the two weirdos cackling about planning boards in the back of their cafe for an hour. They have seen it all at Cracked Skulls. So I'll pop in with a little narration every once in a while if I feel like I need to explain ideas a little more, but for the most part, we can just let this clip roll because I told Sarah to talk to me like I don't know anything because I don't. And it really worked out. I gotta remember to tell more people that. This is what I mean by when I tell you I'm going to ask you some stupid questions.
Oh, great. I can't wait.
Workforce housing and affordable housing. Are they the same thing? Is this like a climate change, global warming thing?
No.
Okay.
So, affordable housing is a term that I never use because it doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
Housing that is affordable, it just means that you are not spending more than 30% of your household income on your housing costs. So, depending on what your household income is, 30% could be anything, which means that some housing is affordable to some people, it's not affordable to other people. Some housing is, affordable to everyone, that kind of deal.
Right. Okay.
So I never use the term affordable housing, though I will sometimes drop the term housing affordability. Workforce housing, on the other hand, has a very set definition per New Hampshire state law, which is awesome because it helps to guide our work. It is rental housing that's affordable to people making 60% of the area median income. And it is for sale housing for people making up to 100% of the median income. So we are in Newmarket right now, where the median income, they're part of the Portsmouth Rochester HMFA, which is a HUD designation, HUD being the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Very hyper-conscious of my acronyms.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's good. I think we're doing okay so far.
Yeah, good. We're in Newmarket right now, and we're part of the Portsmouth Rochester HMFA, so the median income is about $99,000. So we're talking about for sale housing that's about $340,000, and rental housing that's more like $1,340, something like that.
A month, you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So
wow.
It's not wildly inexpensive housing, nor is it luxury housing.
Yeah, 99. That's a pretty high median income for that.
It is, yeah.
What is something like Stratford County lower?
Stratford County is a little bit lower. We don't use counties for workforce housing. We use the HUD designations, and so it's a little bit fuzzy, like Portsmouth and Rochester are in the same one, and those are Rockingham and Stratford, so it spans the counties. Sometimes we'll look at the specific for that community, like we'll look at, say, Rochester's renter median income, because it's so significantly different than their HUD designation.
Interesting.
That part's complicated.
Okay, so but why is it complicated in a let's get into it. Why is it complicated?
So I guess the bottom line is that people are really hung up on the numbers and the data and how it works out in terms of money, but ultimately, when you put it into the perspective of who are we trying to house, who are those people and what can they afford, then it makes it a little easier when you're not dealing with like the legal jargon and making sure that it's technically workforce housing. Ultimately, so in Rochester, for example, when we did a project last year, we lowered our target price a bit because we wanted it to be affordable to the people we're actually trying to capture, which is people who work in downtown Rochester.
So let's back up just to say this. Like, how would you summarize the housing problem in New Hampshire or just in general?
The biggest problem in New Hampshire, I think I'm going to surprise myself and everyone else by saying it's not the affordability part, but it's actually the supply is a bigger problem. Even if you can afford a rent, the supply is so limited that you're not going to be able to find anything. Mm-hmm. So our vacancy rate in New Hampshire is something like 2% in a place like Portsmouth, where it's really oversaturated. It's more like 0.6%. A healthy market would be more like 5 to 6%. And that talks about how quickly apartments or housing units turn over once they get on the market.
Yeah, as a person who tried to find an apartment in Portsmouth, I can definitely speak to how difficult that is. The only reason I ever lived in Portsmouth was because my cousin had an inn with a landlord, and when I got in there, I had an inn with a landlord, so then my friends could move to Portsmouth, and we all lived in the same building, and it was the only place we could live. And when the last one of my friends moved out of that building, it was like, that's it, there's the door. Like, we'll never be able to come back.
Yep. That's totally right. I don't know anybody who lives in Portsmouth just because they actually live there and found an apartment in a conventional way. Everybody's found it in some weird way.
And it's too bad because over the years since, I've had friends or other people contact me and they're like, you lived in Portsmouth, right? What do you know? I know that, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And when you're looking for an apartment, you have to make it a full-time job because if you respond to, say, a Craigslist ad, it comes up 2 seconds ago and there might be a showing and you have to be available for that showing or you're out.
Right.
They just go quickly.
So nationally, I would say people talk about the housing problem more about affordability. But the issue here in New Hampshire is availability for now, probably, right?
Yeah. I mean, affordability is definitely an issue here, too. But the supply is definitely a bigger problem, if not as big of a problem, and one that we're not talking about as much. That's not to say that we should just increase the supply willy-nilly and have those all be luxury housing. That might drive the price down a little bit, but it's probably not going to drive it down enough to make it affordable for the people we want to attract.
Okay, so this one's really half a lightning round at best. I just wanted to point out that this idea that adding more housing is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily solve the affordability problem by itself, it's one of the economic levers that's either just broken or it doesn't work very well in our region for size reasons or other complications like, wage stagnation. And that broken lever creates a need for organizations like the one that Sarah works for, the same way that similar broken levers create a need for an organization like the GAA. They're both Band-Aids on Adam Smith's invisible hand, you know? By the way, was Adam Smith's invisible hand one of his normal ones, or did he have a third? I didn't take economics in college. But I'm sure you probably guessed that already.
What is the obstacle then? What are some of the obstacles
The many, many obstacles.
to having more available housing?
Well, a big part of it is land use regulations, that most of our communities are too restrictive, and it makes it hard for developers to do projects that are financially feasible for them, particularly at those more affordable rates.
That's surprising to me, and I know I can be very naive about these things, but when I think about like land use regulations, I think like, oh, I can't build my dynamite plant next to a school and a library.
Right.
You know, like that's what makes sense to me. But the idea that there would be a problem with building places for people to live, why is that a problem?
It's a really good question. A big part of it was and I'm sure Peter in another episode talked about this, a big part of it was that we made our zoning so that we were zoning out children, so that we wouldn't have children in the school systems because it was driving up property taxes.
Was that done in an explicit way? Did someone come along and say, here is my zoning plan for no kids, Article 1, no kids allowed to live here?
No. Probably not quite that obvious. It was before my time, but yes, more or less, yes.
I mean, people obviously, like, I'm definitely used to, like, words like property owner, like, set off bells in my head from living in Portsmouth, mostly because it was always, whenever you heard property owner, it was an argument of whether or not there was going to be concerts in Prescott Park anymore. You know, because the property owners near the park want there to be no fun next in this park that is the reason that their house is expensive.
Right.
And so every time somebody was running for city council and they talked about the rights of property owners, I was like, not voting for you. Like, I knew that I learned what the code word was. And this is what I was talking about, where sometimes I lose track of where the question was going to go.
Oh, yeah, it's going somewhere.
So we have regulated our land so that we can't build, like, affordable, like basically, like, somebody comes along and says, I want to build an apartment complex with a bunch of two-bedroom apartments. And that is against the zoning regulations because two-bedroom apartments means a couple can come and have a baby and the baby can live in the other room.
So they can build two-bedroom apartments. They're just not going to be able to build enough of them in order to make it financially feasible for them. And whoever wrote the zoning knew that.
Okay. So what did they make financially feasible for them?
So we need more density. Density, it all comes down to the D word, density. The more density you have, economies of scale, you can build more units, which makes your cost per unit go down, so you can rent them out at more affordable rates.
Okay. So one of the objectives of one of your several organizations then, I guess, is that something that you're going after? Like, we need to change the density requirements of regulation, land use regulations.
Yep, definitely.
Am I using all those words correctly?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So if we allow for more density, it makes it so that a guy who wants to build an apartment complex, it makes financial sense for him to build one where families can move.
Yep. And I'm even going to turn up the complexity a notch and add density bonuses. So what that means is you're allowing them to build more units, a more dense complex, but in return they have to designate a certain percent of them as workforce housing, meaning that they fall below that HUD designated limit.
Good afternoon, Dover Planning. This is Nancy.
Hi, I was looking to speak to you, Elena.
Sure, may I ask who's calling?
Yeah, this is Zach Little.
Sure, one moment, please. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good. Hang on, let me try to figure out how to make it. Okay, so I had a question for you about density. And I feel like the best way to do this is, like, just to give you a scenario, okay?
Okay.
So, let's pretend
that I'm a real estate developer.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just make up a name. Like, let's say my name's Derek Vinberg. I'm a real estate developer, and I come to you and I say, Elena, here's what I want to do. I want to build a 1,000 unit apartment complex in Dover, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. Can I do that?
Yes, you can, if you have the proper site, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm planning on just, like, building straight up into the sky like a science fiction movie, like it's going to become this kind of, like, Thunderdome thing where everybody they never leave the tower, and there's, like, Judge Dredd-type enforcement robots.
Wow. Okay, well, I guess I can tell you about the factors at play. It's at 1,000 units, that's going to be pretty unique, and there's various factors that would affect your ability to do that. How's that sound?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so is it downtown?
Let's say it's downtown adjacent. It's walking distance. I'd like it to be walking distance to, shopping facilities.
Okay. So let's assume that, first of all, you're in a part of the downtown or downtown adjacent that allows multifamily housing per the zoning district.
How many of those zones are there? Are there a lot of zones that allow multifamily housing?
There are pretty much most of what you would think of as the downtown, and then some areas that are intended to be like urban density residential permit multifamily dwellings. So then there's a couple other places you can do it as long as you're on the second floor or above and do it in a mixed-use building. So that's actually the first thing. Pretty much anywhere you do that, it's going to have to be a mixed-use building with at least a commercial first floor.
Who's that better for, the town or the developer?
Probably not best for the developer. It's definitely better for the residents and the community as a whole, because it allows people to live upstairs, frequent businesses downstairs. It gives businesses built-in clientele, and to flip that dynamic, and it just brings more. It just makes it more dynamic to have the uses mixed.
But I imagine it's probably a little bit harder to build like a building that allows the ventilation you need at a Chipotle,
Yeah.
Okay.
That and, well, a lot of times somebody who's interested in doing residential development isn't as interested in being a commercial landlord. Developers tend to specialize, so if they're not big on mixed-use development, it might not be up their alley. But anyway.
What persuades them to do it? Just the fact that it's the only game in town?
Right, so it's a requirement in most areas that would permit multifamily are going to require that first floor to be commercial. And if you don't want to do it, or you can't do it, or what have you, you have to go seek special relief to have residential on the first floor. Also, a development that big of 1,000 units, you wouldn't necessarily need the entire first floor to be commercial. We do have a little leeway there, so we might allow you to put some garages for the residences, for example, on the first floor.
I really hope right now that there's someone in your office who thinks you're on a real phone call with someone who wants to build a 1,000 unit building in Dover.
Right.
And you're taking it totally seriously.
Fortunately, I'm pretty much alone. I think, yeah, you're right. If somebody overheard me, they'd be like, who in the world are you talking to? That's not reasonable.
Okay, it's time for another lightning round, a lingo lightning round. See, I may have mixed feelings about college words, but I absolutely love learning on-the-job jargon. Remember when Yara taught us about swan boat? I use that all the time now, mostly in my head. But anyway, Sarah had some great ones.
We learned from Peter Francis that, people hate children, they hate families. I mean, when we saw him speak at Leadership Seacoast, he was a little more incendiary than he was in a room with me. In a room alone, he was a little more conciliatory. He was like, there are reasons that the schools are screwing themselves. There are reasons that you have to respect the rights of people who own property and whatever. He was very both sidesy, What people do, they hate kids. They think that kids are going to make their houses cost more money. Their property taxes go up.
Yep.
So I have on good authority that there are some acronyms that people in your line of work would use to describe the certain sort of people that might show up at a land use regulation meeting. So give me some of those.
Yeah, we got some good ones. So most people know NIMBY, not in my backyard. But most people don't know CAVES, Citizens Against Virtually Everything. Or, this is my favorite one, bananas. Build absolutely nothing, absolutely... Build
absolutely nothing.
Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Nailed it.
I like that. So is this like the kind of thing where like you go to like a town meeting, right? And somebody's up at the microphone, like one of these scenes from a Peter Francis documentary where they're like, you know, there are donor families and there are receiver families, and you're like, hey, check out this banana up there. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, usually I stand up and I'm like, get out of here, you banana.
And do they know what a banana is?
No. No.
Do the NIMBYs know that they're NIMBYs?
That's a really good question. I would love to know the answer to that, actually. There was a study that came out of Boston University last spring.
Go Terriers.
And, oh, is that where you went to school?
Yeah.
That's right. Anyways, there was a study that came out of BU last year that demonstrated that the majority of people who turn out at planning and zoning board meetings are people who are against housing development.
That's a very strange... Okay, like everything else I've encountered in the last couple of years, mostly on the internet, that's a very strange thing to preoccupy yourself with.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because when I read it, I kind of laughed. I thought, like, duh, we already know that. It would have been, I think, more interesting to study why aren't supporters turning out in higher numbers, or even more importantly, how can we get them to? I should add that in any given town, it's usually a small group of people, but they show up to every meeting and they have a presence that makes them feel like they are the majority of the town, but they're really not. So if you go to any town meeting, you can probably figure out who that one person is in every town, and everyone has sort of like their token banana character.
Yeah, like the people on the board already know the person's name and know like what they're gonna. Okay, now we're gonna hear 5 minutes from Marge.
Yeah, they don't even introduce themselves when they get up to the podium. That's what you're supposed to do at planning board meetings. Hi, I'm Sarah Wrightsman. I live on Main Street. Like they're just like, you know who I am.
You know who I am. You know why I'm here. Let's get into it.
Yes, sir, we do. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Get a package from your drugstore today and dissolve these minerals in your own drinking water. You may buy them in the 60-cent or in the $1 size package, which reconstitutes 15 gallons of fine mineral water for home use. Buy Crazy Crystals, use as directed, and let a system free from waste and impurities help you reap the dividend of normal, balanced health.
Tell me again the name of the organization that you are the executive director of.
The Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast.
Okay.
WHCGS. I should put on the record, if it were up to me, we would be the Seacoast Housing Coalition, because that name is a mouthful.
Seacoast, yeah, okay. I like the Seacoast Housing Coalition,
yeah.
But the other one sounds nice too, especially when you add that you're the executive director of. Like, it's
yes.
a very long title, and
yes.
that's nice.
Whenever I make phone calls, I'm always like, "Hi, I'm Sarah from the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast," and they're like, "Where?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the Housing Coalition, you know."
Tell me about like generally what you guys do.
Oh, good question. So we are a really small nonprofit. We work out of the offices of the Regional Economic Development Center, so we have some great resources there. Of course, those two missions are connected. We're talking about economic development and workforce housing, which is housing for the workforce. So we do all education, advocacy, and some sort of combination of technical assistance and connecting communities with resources that are available to them. So a lot of what I do is providing education to community members, to local leaders, to elected officials on just what workforce housing is and why it's so important and how we need to get there. Big part of it is talking to people who really have the expertise, like developers, and connecting them with the people who have the power to make change, like planning boards or planning staff.
I can see that. Okay.
Yeah.
So you find an architect who wants to build a building, and you bring him to some, city planner guy.
Right.
And you say, hey, Joe, meet Mary. And
it's amazing how many times that a policy gets passed at the local level that they never talk to a developer about. How do you know that your zoning ordinance is going to work? if you didn't talk to a developer who are the people who are actually on the ground building and using the zoning ordinance.
It's amazing to me that somebody like you has to do that stuff, but you do. And a very weird thing when you start to look at the way local governments function, the way states function, whatever, is that there's all of this like stuff that has evolved almost like biologically. I've been reading a lot of Michael Pollan, so I think of everything in biological terms, but like I think of it as like a plant that, you know, the state of New Hampshire is like a plant that grows too low to the ground. So it created all these other weird leaves that show up in unexpected places to collect all the sunlight that it needs because it wouldn't get it otherwise because it just grew the wrong way.
Yep.
And there's so many biological compromises in the state of New Hampshire and the way that it works. I mean, that's true about everything. That's true of the healthcare industry. That's true of everything. Everything has to get built one piece at a time. It doesn't get built with any kind of forethought.
Yep.
You know, it's the same as animals. And if you're like a intelligent design believer or something, it's like, man, why snakes have hip bones, man? Why do they have those? That was a mistake.
Right. Do snakes have hip bones?
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah, and like dolphins have like vestigial fingers and stuff, you know? It's like, yeah, it's because that's because the animals, like maybe it's whales, started in the water, evolved to land, moved back to the water. So they're messed up, man. They got problems. That whales are the healthcare industry of the biological world. Talk to me about like what you did this week. Like and I know you wear a million hats. So even just isolated to one role. Like what did that look like this week?
Let's see. Today's Friday. What did I do this week?
We're meeting on a Friday afternoon. We're dealing with a little bit of that millennial burnout you hear a lot of.
Hey, when you wear this many hats, you know. All right. So let's see. My job is definitely as the executive director, and I don't have a support staff, although I do have someone who helps with graphic design and promotion, and I have the use of an administrative assistant who helps with some stuff, and an accountant. Fantastic. I don't have that on my plate too. But I do a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. So some administrative stuff. I do a ton of fundraising, which is not my favorite part of the job, but super important for keeping the organization running.
Is that like a lot of phone calls, or you're like going and hitting up people in person?
Depends. Grant applications, some of them are online, and that's a little bit easier. Sometimes I have to go, schmooze people and buy them coffee because, that's what they need. A lot of it is just trying to be engaged and really talk to people and sell them on why. Like, why should you give money to the Workforce Housing Coalition? But every time I'm doing that, I'm not doing real programming work, which is kind of a bummer. So a lot of that looks like, honestly, when people ask me what my day-to-day looks like, I usually remind them that, I just send a lot of emails. There's a lot of emailing.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is going out into the world and talking to people and going to conferences and, going to talk to planners or developers about projects that are happening or policy that's happening, or helping people sort of get into touch with their resources. So, for example, a community that is applying for a municipal technical assistance grant, an MTAG, another abbreviation.
Uh-huh.
The MTAG grant gives them money to hire a consultant to look at their zoning for the purposes of housing supply and diversity and affordability. So stuff like that. It's a lot of talking to people and grassroots stuff and building coalitions. And
shouldn't the consultants help do that so that they get themselves paid?
Right. That's a good question, actually. I wonder if that would be a conflict of interest for the consultant to hire themselves, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So yeah, I have not. The only thing I've ever done is fundraising for nonprofit organizations, and I get that is unfortunately half of it or more.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. You're talking about the idea of your housing costs shouldn't be a certain percentage of the same thing should be true of nonprofits. Your fundraising time shouldn't have to be more than 60% of your time during the week.
Yep.
But that's part of the reason things go so slowly, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And that's. but what else are you going to do?
Right, definitely. If I didn't have to do any fundraising, I could do like, another project or another educational panel or something every year to like eat up all that time. But that's just, it's how the very small nonprofit world of New Hampshire works. There's a lot of tiny organizations.
Yeah. So when you do the educational panels and the meeting with lawmakers and that kind of thing, obviously there are a lot of different ways to measure success. Like, I mean, if you literally get a project in motion, or, you introduce Joe Architect to Mary City Planner and they begin a lifelong friendship, that's big. When you're educating the public, that's like hearts and minds shit. So, how do you know it's working, or do you know?
It's a great question. Attributing successes that happen or measuring whether or not we're changing people's minds and attitudes, like are we turning NIMBYs into YIMBYs, which is yes in my backyard.
I love it.
It's really, really hard. So after our events, we do exit surveys. I don't know how worthwhile that is or how much that really tells us about what a difference we're making. But there are definitely some things that have said to me that, like, people are getting excited about this issue and this issue is gaining momentum, and that's really cool. So, for example, when the city of Portsmouth started their project to redevelop the McIntyre building, they hosted a public listening session. And even though there's no workforce housing in the current plan for that site, the community came out and demanded that they put workforce housing. They wanted to see affordable housing in that spot right in the core of downtown. And that was so cool, because who knows if that would have happened 10 years ago, if like having affordable housing in the center of downtown would have been a priority for the 100 or so Portsmouth residents who came out. So I like to think that even though that wasn't all us, that we played a role in starting to shape that conversation and increase the amount of people who are just saying, we need workforce housing, this is important.
Yeah. I have always understood, like, because my uncle owns a restaurant and can never hire anybody, that workforce housing was an issue, but have only started to conceptualize, like, what I could do about it. And I mean, one of those things is have a podcast where you talk about it, and have people who wouldn't necessarily even think to try to understand these issues, have them understand it, like, already, like, I'm trying to, like, do a little bit of that groundwork for them. So, like, here's the basic outline, and if you decide you don't care about it still, cool, but you wouldn't have even had to decide if you cared about it or not yet.
Right.
So we're, like, getting that part out of the way.
Hey, look at me basically wrapping up the whole episode right there in the interview, right? I love it when that happens. I mean, it has literally never happened before. But anyway, as people have noted, this podcast has gradually migrated over the years from a show about how to be a better artist to a show about how to be a better person. And how to, maybe use art to try and fix the world, or at least start fixing it. That's a reflection of my changing thinking. A podcast is inevitably a reflection of one's thinking, even if it's ostensibly about Game of Thrones or whatever. So as I was beginning to make that turn from better artist to better person, I heard about a program called Leadership Seacoast. They're a nonprofit organization that runs a 6-month program for emerging community leaders. I applied for the class of 2019, and I was almost absurdly invested in getting in. I'm a person who needs a lot of reinforcement, and I needed to know that this new path I was setting out on was the right one. Luckily, I did get in. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't. It would have been the start of my supervillain origin story. I'd be, designing the blood-harvesting robots for Peter Francis's hypothetical hospital. So as we speak, it's May, and I have nearly finished the program. It has been huge, life-altering, and it's going to affect the podcast for a long time. How long, you ask? Well, there are 9 official program days in the class, and Peter Francis spoke on day 1. So that's 2 episodes already, and they took me 3 months to finish. I'm saying you're going to be unpacking this with me for a while. We're not even done with this subject, really.
We're going to hear more from Sarah and also from Steve and Becky in another episode sometime soon. Not next time, though. On the next episode of The Last Podcast, we're taking a break from all of this to cover a story that I've been working on for literally over a year. It's about the collapse and rebirth of a multi-million-dollar business and a very interesting character who got sidelined along the way. And it might take me a couple of weeks to finish it, so thank you for your patience in advance. Thank you to Steve and Becky at the GAA, and Elena Piekut and Sarah Wrightsman, who, by the way, was just named a finalist in the Seacoast 10 to Watch contest honoring young professionals. Pretty cool. Thanks also to Peter Francis and Lori Waltz-Gagnon and everybody at Leadership Seacoast, and thank you for listening. We'll be back soon.